Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on TracerPlus Lookup fields. I am your presenter, Joe Kraebel. I'm a mobile solutions architect here at PTS. So what we're going to go over today is learn how to relate data tables and eliminate repetitive data entry using what we call lookup fields. So what we're going to be going over today, some topics are creating an application, utilizing lookup fields to speed data entry, updating data retrieved from a source session with new information, and then talk about a few, or actually demonstrate a few real-world samples of how lookups can be used. All right, so what is a lookup field? So a lookup field is a field that's populated from another session, or what we refer to as a source session, based on data entered into a separate field. So picture entering an item number. The lookup field could be a description, and that once it matches the item number, it can return the description for that item. So some uses for lookup fields are to eliminate repetitive data entry, speed up your data capture. You can verify info about items scanned. You can update source data based on some changed values, and then also add new data to a source session. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start the demonstration. So what you're looking at now is our TracerPlus desktop software. So this is our easy-to-use design software. It's free to use to create powerful and enterprise-class mobile forms for both barcode and RFID scanning. And it's where we're going to create our application that we can deploy to our Windows Mobile, CE, or Android devices. I also want to mention that we will be supporting iOS in the near future. We may have a beta out this summer, and then a full release probably by the end of the year. All right, so I'm going to start off by grabbing one of our samples from our Solution Center. So if I click that Samples button, we have a few different categories here we can choose an app from. So let's go into Inventory Control, and then we can pick from a variety of different pre-configured applications here. I'm going to choose the Inventory Issue and Receive, as that uses a lot of lookup functionality. So I'm going to select that. It gives you a brief description of what it is, and gives you a little screenshot of what it looks like on the device. And then we're just going to go ahead and hit Next, and then import that. So this project is now in our desktop software. Like I said, it's fully configured already. You can use it as is, or you can make your own tweaks to it as you see fit. So we have 3 sessions within this project. We have a receive product, an issue product, and a view product list. So the idea here is to load your product lists to this view product list session, and that will be all of your items. Then we have a receive product and issue products. So I'm going to deploy this to my connected device. All right, so once we do that, you'll see our 3 sessions here: receive product, issue product, and view product list. So if we go into receive product, you'll see that we have a part number, a receive to, as well as a description, quantity on hand, and quantity to receive. So the idea here is to scan a part number. That'll look up our description. Then we'll select a receive to location, which will then look up what we currently have on hand at that location. And then we would simply enter a quantity to receive. Once we save that, it'll create a receive transaction, but then also update our product list with that new quantity. Same thing for issue. Scan a part number, looks up description. Select an issue from, looks up quantity on hand. Then we enter a quantity to issue. That'll actually subtract from our on hand and then update our item list. So here's our product list. This is where we'll actually sync some data some item data that we can actually use for the lookups. So I'm just going to clear this product list out. And what I'm going to do is create a quick sync profile and process and connect to sync this data over. So this is our connect tool. This is an enterprise class data syncing tool that allows you to sync to and from text files, Excel, and any type of ODBC data source. So I'm going to create a new project and then add a new sync profile. So we'll look for that in our connect setting here. And we'll call this a profile that's sync to device. So this profile will be used to sync the data to the device. So I'll add a sync process. It's going to come from ODBC. So we actually include a sample access database with Connect that includes data matching a few of our samples, this being one of them. So I'm going to choose our TracerPlus Connect sample and then our product list. Then on the destination side, this is what we're syncing to. It's going to be TracerPlus. We want to sync it to the product list session. And then we want to marry up our field mappings down below. So location to location, part to part, description to description, and quantity to quantity. Lastly, we want to set up our update options. So when we sync the data to the device, what do we want us to do? In this case, I'm just going to overwrite it. So we can actually name this process. I'll call it sync item list. And I'll go ahead and save this. We'll call this inventory manage. And if we even jump over to the data viewer, we'll see some of the items that are available in our product list here. So now what we want to do is set up a sync process or a sync button on the device that'll get this data to our product list on this device. So one thing we can do is we can either add a sync button to one of our forms, or we can create a sync session. I usually like to create a separate session for syncs. It allows you to manage it better. We call it sync. We'll work with a blank canvas, and then we'll add a button here. We'll call it sync to device. And what we want to do is set that to a button action of do sync. Once we do that, we have a few things we need to set here, including a host ID and a profile ID. So a host ID is where is this device going to sync to, or what PC is going to be running Connect. So it's going to be my PC. Since we're doing a cradled sync, I'm going to put in PPP_peer, which is used for cradle syncs, and you'll see that has a host ID of 1. If I jump back to that, we set our host ID to 1. Now if I go over to Connect, we go to Configure, we look at our sync profile, and we see that that profile ID is 1. So we'll jump back here, and we want to sync profile ID 1 in Connect. So that's saying once we click this button, it's going to try to do a sync looking to this host, and it's going to sync this profile. So I'm just going to deploy my changes to the connected device. And this is a physical device, and I'm remote controlling with my mobiler tool. It's free utility available to all. So now we see our sync session. If I jump over to the synchronized page, this will give us status as we do syncs. So if I click sync to device, you'll see some activity take place there, and that sync took place pretty quick. And if we look at our product lists, there's our 8 products that we had in our database table. So now I can demonstrate how these lookup fields actually work. So if we go to receive product, we'll scan or key in a part number here. You'll see that once I do that, it looks up our description of men's polo. You'll notice quantity on hand is still blank. Then we want to do a receive to. So let's receive it to stockroom 1. And once we select that, it's now going to do a lookup based on part number plus stockroom to pull in the quantity on hand for that particular location. because we don't want to just grab the quantity of the item itself, because it could be located in multiple stock rooms. So we're able to do what we call an AND lookup based on more than one field. So now if we do a quantity receive, let's say we receive 25, and then hit save, we go back and look at our product list, you'll see that that quantity is now 35 because it added the 25 to the existing 10. And that's using something we call update source, which I'll explain a little bit later. Let's do another item here. So if we do the same item, men's polo, but we look in stockroom 2, we see that we have 5 in there. Let's receive 17. So that should give us 22 of those. So if we look back in our product list, you'll see that now we have 22. So we'll see here, if we wanted to filter this down, we go part number 123, 123. We can see that we have this part in 2 different stock rooms, and you'll see that our updated quantities are 35 and 22. Now if we want to issue product, we do the same thing. Scan it, looks up our description, choose where we want to issue from, stockroom 1. Looks up our current quantity on hand of 35. Let's say we'll issue 18. That should leave us with 17. Click Save. And then we'll just go back and check. And you'll see that's now 17. So that's the basics of this session. So what I actually want to do is recreate this session from scratch just to show you how we actually configured all of this. So I'm going to jump back over to the desktop software and click the New Project option. So we had 3 sessions there. We had a receive, issue, and a product list. So we'll do receive, issue, and then product list. First thing we'll set up is our product list. This carries our fields that we need. So the first thing we have is a location, part number, description, and then an on hand. So like I said, this can be, you can actually key new items in on the device, or you can load this data from your existing systems or Excel sheets if you maintain a list of items already. So if we go to receive, some of the data we want to capture here, maybe we want a date of the transaction. We want the part number, our receive to location, description of the item, currently on hand, and then a receive quantity. We'll do the same for issue. We need a date, part number, issue to, description, on hand, issue quantity. All right, so if we start setting some of these fields up, date, that would just be a data type of date time. This will actually grab the current date time of the device automatically, and you can even format that. You can either have a date only, a time only, or you can have both, and then you can even choose from different date formats. I'm just going to do a date time, or a date I should say. Since it's a date that's auto-populated, maybe we don't want the user touching this, we can set that as read-only. Our part number is what we're going to scan, so we'll leave that as a text field. Receive to, we want to select from a drop-down, as it makes things easier as opposed to typing them. But if you did have your locations barcoded, you could also scan the location. So let's set this as a drop-down, and then we have drop-down options. Once again, we could say stockroom 1, stockroom 2, and stockroom 3. Description. So this is going to be our first lookup field. So you'll notice we have a lookup options tab. And this tab will actually be visible for most field types. It'll be visible for text, drop-down, checkbox, signature, image, calculated, and I believe even radio button. So you're able to actually do lookups on different field types. So even though if you have a drop-down value, you can actually still look up the data. And if it happens to be different, you could change the drop-down, and then when you submit, you can have that update. So in this case, we want to look up the description, so we want to enable lookups. First thing we need to do is define where this lookup data is going to come from. So which session are we going to get this data from, and that's going to be our product list. The next thing we need to define is our lookup relationships, or what are we comparing between the local and source session that's going to be able to locate this item. So that's going to be our part number. So once we scan a part number into the local field, we want to match that to the part number in the product list session. And if we find that, then we want to return our source field, which is description. So that's saying here, we're going to look into the product list based on the part number to return the description. We can also add a value if the item is not found. So let's say we scan an item that's not in our database. We could just say, item not found. Another setting here is a trigger field. So this is going to actually trigger the lookup. Most cases, that's going to be whatever your relationship is. So that'll be our part number. Our next field is on hand. So this is where we want to look up our quantity on hand, but this should be based on the location plus the part number. That's where we're going to set up this lookup. Once again, our product list, but instead of one relationship, we're going to have two. So we want to base this off of the receive to in the local field and the location in the remote field. We want to base it off of the location and then also the part number. And once we add two relationships, we have the option of how the lookup should be performed. Should it be an AND or should it be an OR? So in this case, it's going to be an AND because we only want to return that based on the location plus the part number. Cases where you would use OR is maybe if you were doing asset scanning, where you'd want to look up an asset description based on an asset tag or a serial number. So that's a case where you could use an OR lookup based on more than one field. But once again, we want our trigger field to be actually location because we're already scanning the part number and then we're selecting our receive to location. So that's what we want to trigger that lookup based on. And then the source field we're returning is the on hand. Then we have a received quantity here. This is something that can be keyed in, or we can use a number pop-up like you saw before. I'll just leave it as keying it in. So we'll just leave that as a text field. And now what we need to do is add some hidden fields that's actually going to take care of the adding up the quantity, or basically adding up the on-hand to the received quantity, and then updating our source session with that new quantity. So I usually like to name it, we'll call it update underscore quantity. And we're going to set this as a field type of calculated, but you'll still see that we have the lookup options enabled or visible. So we'll go there. This is going to be set up exactly like our on-hand lookup here. So it's going to be product list based on location, the received received to and location, and part number is going to be triggered on the received to and our on hand. Then we want to jump to our calculated options. We want to do an add function here because we're receiving, so we want to add it to our quantity on hand. So in order to do that, we need to make this a data type of number so that when we actually do an add, it does a mathematical addition. If we left that as general, it would try to do a field concatenation. So what we want to do is add our on hand to our received quantity. So now in order to update this to our source session, we're going to come back to the lookup options and check this update source option. So now this is saying once we submit this record, we should now update this source. So based on this lookup of this on hand field, it's going to take whatever we got from our calculation and then post it to our source session in the on hand fields. Okay, so that's all with that. So I'll remove our extra fields there. Next thing we want to just set up is maybe the flow of the app. So one, if we go to advanced, we want to start on the part number field since our date will be populated. Then our key field is usually what we want to look up on, so that'll be our part number field. So part number, once we scan that, we want it to go to receive to, so that's what we see in the after scan. Once we select a location, we don't need to go to the description because that's going to be populated. We don't need to go on to the on hand because that'll also be populated. So we want to jump down to the received quantity. And then the received quantity, once we key that in, maybe we just want to auto-submit the record. So if we set auto-submit, once we enter a number and then hit the enter key, it's going to submit that record locally, update the quantity in the source session, and then we can return the scan to the cursor to the part number field ready for the next item. Another thing we can do if we are scanning in multiple items to the same location, we can turn off clear on submit for our receive to field so that we don't have to keep selecting that. So after a submit, it'll maintain that value. So the only thing we need to do is scan the part numbers. All right, so the next thing we want to do is build our form. Actually, before I do that, the update quantity, we don't need that to be visible. So we'll hide that by unchecking visible. Then I'll build my default form here. We could obviously doctor this up and make it look a lot nicer. I'll just do a quick fix here. Now, if we wanted to, we could change our background color here. And maybe we'll make these white. And we'll just change our buttons. We'll make those a dark blue with white text. And maybe we want to make those bold. All right, so now if I deploy this to my device, we should see this same exact form. Okay, if we go to receive, so there's our form. You'll notice we have some refresh buttons here. We can actually get rid of those. Those will appear for all lookup, calc, and date type of fields, anything that's refreshable. So if we go back to the form designer, we can click on, let's see, the date, and then this hide refresh button, just set that to true for all these fields. Also, you notice the drop-down looks a little small. That's a common issue on newer Windows mobile devices. We can counter that by just increasing the font size, usually to 14. Lastly, since description and on-hand are being looked up, maybe we want to set these to read-only. So I'll just check both of these as read-only. Now if we deploy this again, You'll also notice once I click deploy, we have the option to push this to a Windows Mobile or Android device. So I can push this same project to either platform. Select our receive. So you'll see it's starting to look a little better already. Obviously, we can do a lot more to this to make it look a lot nicer, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to leave it as that is. You can even add your own, company logos or images to the form as well. So let me just configure the issue session real quick. So we want to add that update quantity fields. Then we can remove our other fields here. And we'll set this up similarly. We have a date time with the date, read only, issue 2 as a drop down, stockroom 1, stockroom 2, stockroom 3. Description, that's our lookup. Once again, enable lookups. We're looking in product lists based on the part number only for this one. And then we want to return the description. Once again, if it's not found, we could say not found. On hand is where we have both the location or the issue to and location and the part number. We want to trigger that based off of the issue to and look up our on hand. Issue quantity is just a regular field, and then our update quantity we will set as a calculated field, and it's a number. And so let's go to lookup options. Once again, that's set up just like our on-hand fields. The only reason we have to do this is we can't do a calculation on itself. So we couldn't actually do this in the on-hand field, as it wouldn't be able to do a calculation on itself. So that's why we need to add this additional field to do the subtraction or addition between the two fields. All right, so part, and this is an end lookup triggered on issue 2, looking up on hand, and we want that update source checked. In this case, we're going to do a subtract. So we want to subtract the on hand from the issue quantity. Lastly, we'll set some things read-only here. Actually, this one just needs to be visible false. Date read-only, description read-only, on hand read-only. Part number should go to issue 2 to issue quantity, then issue quantity and auto submit going back to part number. And then issue 2, we don't want to clear and submit. Then we just want to set our start on and key fields to part number. Jump over to the form designer. We'll build our default form real quick. This one I won't even clean up. I'll just deploy this. I'll also just build this form, which is already built. And we'll push this out. Right, so if we look at receive, we look at issue. Once again, that's going to have our refresh and drop down issue. So I'll just mark those real quick. Refresh true. And our drop down to 14. And actually, before I deploy, let me add a sync button. So instead of adding a sync session, I could actually add a sync button to the form here by clicking button. Put it on the form. We'll call it sync. Once again, do sync. Post 1, and I'll sync it to profile 2 as I'll create a new profile for this since it's a different project, project 1. I'll come back over here, create new profile, sync profile. It's going to be project 1. Add our source of our TracerPlus Connect sample. on our product list. TracerPlus is the destination to our product list. And we have our fields lined up and overwrite. So since we set this button to profile 2, it'll sync that second profile instead. So I'll just deploy this. And if we go to the product list session and press our sync button, I actually didn't define a host this time, so you'll see what happens. You can actually set a host on the fly. All right, so there's our data. Go to receive, enter our part. So there it is, looking up our description, men's polo. Select our receive to, and just like in the other session, it looked up our on hand. We'll receive 20, and once I hit enter, it's going to auto submit. You'll see this records go to 3, and then you'll see that the receive to remains. That was due to that clear on submit being turned off for that field. So that's saying that once you submit a record, we don't want to clear this value. We're going to retain it for every other record until we manually change it. So now I just need to scan the next item. Just hit enter. See, we have 15 of this item. We'll add 10. And it submits. Check our product list. You'll see we now have 30 and 25. We can do the same for issue. Scan our part. Select issue 2. We have 30. Let's issue 12. Submits. We should now have 18. So the next thing I want to show is how we actually add items to a session using lookups. So an example of this is if a tech's doing a work order out in the fields, they can actually, they have basically what we call a header row or the work order record, which will just be a single line with, maybe customer number, work order number, date, description of problem, but then maybe the tech wants to scan parts that they use on the work order. Now, we don't want to track that in that work order header. We would actually want to add that to what we would call a work order items table or session. So we can actually use lookups to add this data to a separate session, even when it's not there already. So I'm just going to add a couple sessions to my existing project here, just to show you can actually do multiple things within a single project. So I'll add 2 sessions. So we'll call this one work order, and this one will be work order items. So work order, maybe we want to date the work order number, the customer, maybe a problem, any notes, maybe you want to take a picture, and then maybe you'd start scanning parts. So we'll say part number, and then we want to enter a quantity. So we just want to keep scanning part numbers and quantities and just keep adding that. So like we did in the updating source of the previous project, we want to add an additional hidden field. We'll call this one add item. And then I'll take care of adding our items to the work order. So work order items, maybe we want a date. We want the work order number. We want the part. And then we want the quantity used. We can clear the rest. So date, once again, read only. Work order number will key in customer. We will add a third session here called work orders. This will be work order number, customer, and reported problem. So then we'll go to lookups. We'll go ahead and look that up. Go and look up at work orders based on work order number. We'll grab the customer. The problem, we'll do the same. Look in work orders based on work order number to grab our problem. Notes will just be a text field. Picture would be, if the device had a camera, we could take a picture of either showing proof of repair or the damage. And then we'll just scan and start entering quantities. So first we want to add this. So once again, we'll set that as a calc field. Lookup will be looking into work order items, but we want to base this off of the date plus the work order number plus the part. And we're going to update the quantity field. So in this case, we're going to do an update source, and we're going to do an append if not found. Because basically, we're setting a lookup here that's going to fail automatically, but that append if not found is actually going to add this row to this source session here because it wasn't found versus updating it. So if we set up our calc options, so this particular case, we're just going to do a concatenation. So I'm just going to grab the value from the quantity field. So whatever we key in here is also going to show up in here, but once we submit, it's going to post a new row to our work order item session based with these 3 fields of information plus our quantity fields. So when we do an append if not found, it posts all the data from the lookup relationships as well as the source field. Once again, that can be read-only. We don't need to see that, so we'll do visible false. So date, we don't want to start on date. We want to start on work order number. And once we scan work order number, maybe we want to go to notes, and then notes to picture, and then picture to part. Part goes to quantity. Quantity can auto-submit and go back to part. Now if we build our form here, all right, so maybe we want to add an additional tab here. That'll be for our part scanning. And what we can actually do is add a button here that's going to tell us to go to that next page. So go to page, these are 0 base. We want to go to page 1, which is actually 2. And so maybe we'll say scan parts. Once we press that, that's going to jump to our second tab here, where we can start scanning parts. And then we can add a button. We'll say done when we're done scanning. That'll return back to page 1, which is a go-to page of 0. The last thing we want to set here is the update options. Since this is a header record, we don't want to keep adding new records every time we scan parts, so we're just going to keep updating based on the work order number. So now as we submit records here, we're going to have our header information, which is date, work order, customer, problem, notes, and picture. But then it's going to post all the items scanned to the work order items session. I'm going to deploy this. So here's our 3 new sessions. So the first thing I want to do, let me add a couple work orders here. Let me actually clear out what's in here. So we'll say our work order 1001, customer Joe Smith. Let's say noise coming from vents. And maybe we'll add another one here. And this one is PC not working. All right, if we look in work order items, let's make sure, let's clear this out. So we have 0 records in there now. So if I come to the work order, let's scan our work order 1001. That lookups our customer and problem. You can enter some notes here. Say, tighten vent screws. And if you wanted to, you click the camera button, take a picture. And then we could jump over to scan parts. And actually one thing, before I even do this, I just realized I didn't do yet, is we have to turn on or turn off clear on submit for all these fields. So as we're scanning parts, we're going to want this data to retain. I'm just going to turn off clear on submit for those 6 fields. And then let's deploy this. All right, so 1001. Go to scan parts. Let's say 1111, quantity 5, 2222, quantity 2, 3333, quantity 3. So that made 3 submit sounds, but you'll see we still only have 1 record here. So if we come back, we look at our work order, we have our 1 row here. And if we look at our work order items, here's the 3 items that we just scanned. We have the date, the work order number, the parts, and the quantity used. So that's how you can use the lookup field with the append option to actually add new items to a source session or to source data. And the last thing I wanted to show you quick is another one of our samples. It's a delivery tracking app where it's actually incorporating lookups with a grid control, or what we call a grid control. So we go to route accounting, deliver goods, and this is basically similar. I don't know if you ever had Staples deliver items to you, but basically you load a list of items to deliver to a client, then you go into the deliver list, enter an order number, it shows what should be delivered, and then as you deliver them, they get removed from the grid. So I will just deploy this project. There's our 2 sessions. I'm just going to clear out our data here. All right, so what we want to do is get some data to our deliver list. This is also one of our sample sessions. So I will just add a 3rd profile here real quick. It's called deliver goods. Add a process to sync from ODBC. Like I said, this is one of our samples. So that's the deliver list data. To TracerPlus, we want to go to our deliver list session, and then we just marry up our fields here and set it to overwrite. All right, so I can also come here and do the sync. I don't know if this is going to work. This isn't always the most reliable method, but looks like it's going to work for us. There's our deliver list here. So here's our order number, the items to deliver, and description. You'll see they're all set to delivered false right now and no delivery date. If I come in here, select an order number. So once I select an order number, it shows the items to deliver in our grid, and as I scan items, basically it's going to happen quick, but it's looking up the description and then submitting a deliver status of true to our source session, which is then removing it from the grid as it's filtered on it being false. I'll scan the others here. And as we scan them, they all remove. Then we can go to acknowledge. We can sign for it, or the user can sign for it, enter a name, and then that saves with that deliver header record similar to the work order header. So we have the single record for the deliver, but then in our deliver list, it updated those 3 items with the deliver status of true and a date delivered. So then you would then sync that back to your database and update your deliver list to show that this was delivered. So that was the scenarios I wanted to show you for how you can use lookups. You can even use them further than what I've demonstrated today. But you'll see that it's a pretty powerful and easy to use tool that should speed and eliminate repetitive data entry. All right, so once again, I want to thank everyone for coming out today. I hope you got a lot out of this and ready to use lookups. So enjoy the rest of your day.